The number 4 sat at the bottom of the report like something that had always been there waiting. I had processed 47 incident reports that morning: cargo disputes, boundary violations, 1 minor fuel theft near the Pelly's corridor that required a form I had not used in 6 years, standard work, the kind of work that fills a career and leaves no particular scar. Then the 48th report arrived. I am Verith 9, diplomatic attaché, 3rd rank assigned to the Keth Imperial Adjudication Val. Threefold patience, I have served the Keth Compact for 212 cycles. I have filed reports on 14 territorial engagements, 3 species contact events, and 1 incident involving a junior officer and a malfunctioning food synthesizer that I still to this day consider my finest paperwork. I say this so you understand, I am not a soldier, I am not a diplomat in any real sense. I am the person who writes down what happened, applies the correct classification, and sends it up the chain where it becomes someone else's problem. The 48th report was a military suppression incident, Sector 7 disputed Territory C4. A Keth patrol vessel had intercepted a human convoy operating without a transit permit in contested space. Standard procedure. The convoy had not responded to communication attempts. The patrol commander, a man named Gorth 7, had authorized a deterrent strike. The convoy's lead ship was destroyed. 2 additional vessels were disabled. I recorded this. I applied the correct classification. My hand was steady. Then I reached the manifest. Human convoys in sector were mostly agricultural, soil processors, seed stock, families moving to the new colony, installations that humans kept building at a pace that made our cartographers quietly furious. The manifest for this convoy listed standard agricultural equipment, personal effects and passenger classification, non-combatant dependents, developmental stage, children. I stopped. I counted. 11 children had been logged on the convoy. Of the 11, 7 had reached escape pods, 7 were recovered, processed, and currently sitting in a cath holding facility, 60 light minutes away, waiting for transfer arrangements. 4 had not reached the pods. I read the line 3 times, not because I doubted the numbers. The numbers were clear. The numbers were always clear. I read it 3 times because there is a version of me, the version that had filed 47 other reports that morning, that wanted to move past it the way you move past a stone in a field. You see it, you walk around it, you do not pick it up. I picked it up. 4 non-combatant dependents, developmental stage, unrecovered. Below that line in the cargo section, itemized with the precise lovelessness that military manifests require, was a list of personal effects found in the debris field: clothing, a water filtration kit, a portable music device, child-sized, listed under owner designation 3 of 11. Owner designation 3 of 11 was not one of the 7. I poured myself a drink. We call it drinking the cath, though the word our language uses is closer to bracing. You brace yourself against something. You a glass and you brace. I sat with the number 4 for a long time. Here is the thing about working in records for 212 cycles. You develop a sense for numbers that should not be. Not wrong numbers. Wrong numbers are easy. Wrong numbers means someone made a clerical error and you correct it, and You move on. The number 4 was not wrong. It was familiar. I could not at that moment say where I had seen it before. The memory was in the archive of my mind, behind a door I had closed a long time ago and marked "Do not open. This is old. This is not your problem anymore." I opened the second database, the Compact Historical Incident Archive. I typed a search query with very specific parameters: human involvement, children harmed, outcome classification. The search returned 14 results. 13 of them were minor incidents. Disagreements settled at tribunals. Apology credits exchanged. One had resulted in a trade embargo that lasted 4 years and cost someone in accounting a great deal of sleep. The 14th result was locked behind 3 security classifications and a clearance level I technically possessed but had never used. I sat looking at the locked file for a moment. The icon for it on my screen was small and gray and said nothing about itself. Files that say nothing about themselves are the only kind worth reading. I entered my clearance codes. The file opened. It was called the Ivilan Incident Assessment. The Ivilan were a species I knew by name. Everyone in the Compact knew them by name, the way you know the name of a city that no longer exists. You know it, you do not visit it. There is nothing there to visit. The file was 31 pages. The first 28 pages were operational data, fleet positions, engagement timelines, a list of Cath vessels involved in what was described neutrally as a diplomatic deterioration event. Page 29 was the cause of incident assessment. I read it once. I closed the file. I sat with the number 4 again, but it was a different number 4 now. It had a different weight, the kind of weight you feel in your chest rather than your hands. I poured another drink. Then I picked up my communicator and requested an emergency audience with Fleet Commander Das Kurith. His office replied in under a minute. The reply was polite in the way that replies from powerful people are always polite, meaning it was not polite at all. The commander was not available for non-essential matters. I wrote back. I used words I had not used in a single communication in my 212 years of service. I used the words urgent, immediate risk, and the phrase, "I request you consider the Ivilan file." There was a pause. The reply came back in 4 minutes. The commander would see me in the morning. I did not sleep. I sat at my desk in the low light of the threefold Patience's administrative wing, and I read the Ivilan file 2 more times. I read it the way you read something when you are hoping you misunderstood it the first time. When you are hoping the words will rearrange themselves into something less specific. They did not rearrange. On my secondary screen, still open, was the manifest from the 48th report, the music device, the number 4, the name of the patrol commander, Gareth 7, who had filed his own report 2 hours after the incident, citing successful deterrence and minimal collateral impact. Minimal collateral impact. I have filed stranger reports. I have never sat awake all night thinking about one. By the time the ship's lighting shifted to morning cycle, I had written 3 different versions of what I was going to say to Duz Kara. The first version was careful, measured, the kind of language that career diplomats use when they want to be heard without being dismissed. The second version was shorter. The third version was 1 page. It contained 2 questions. I had written them down not because I planned to read from a page like a student, but because writing them made them real, and I needed them to be real before I walked into that room. The questions were: did we harm human children? Do we know what danger approaches? I folded the page. I put it in my inner coat pocket. I felt it there, light as paper, heavy as the Evelyn file. I went to see the commander. Kara's office was the kind of room designed to make you feel small, not in the obvious way of low ceilings or oversized furniture, in the way of perfect order, every surface clean, every document filed, the kind of room that says without saying a word that everything here is under control, and the person standing in it is the source of that control. I stood in it and felt the paper in my pocket. He let me stand for 2 full minutes before he looked up from his display. This was a choice. I have worked with enough powerful people to know the difference between someone who is genuinely busy and someone who is making a point. Gareth was making a point. Vareth 9, he said. His voice was even. Commanders who have suppressed 40 species tend to develop even voices. You mentioned the Evelyn file. I did, sir. That file is sealed. I hold the clearance level to access it, sir. I accessed it. He looked at me the way a building looks at weather, not hostile, simply permanent, certain that the weather would pass. Sit down, he said. I sat. I told him about the 48th report. I told him clearly, using the exact language of the manifest. 11 children, 7 recovered, 4 not. I placed the number in the room between us like an object, and I let him look at it. He looked at it. Collateral impact in deterrence operations is a documented and accepted. I am aware of the doctrine, sir. He paused. Let me tell you something about pausing. In front of a Keth Fleet commander, you do not do it, not if you want your career to survive the meeting, not if you want your assignment to continue, not if you value the particular office you have spent 200 cycles quietly earning. I was aware of all of this. I paused anyway. The Evelyn file, I said, page 29. The cause of incident assessment, the field reads provoked. The Evelyn struck a human transport. Children were aboard. The Evelyn sent a victory communique. The Evelyn are gone. Vareth 9. That incident was 11 days, sir. He stopped. It took 11 days, I said. The Evelyn had a fleet 3 times the tonnage of anything humans have fielded since. They had faster ships, older technology, military tradition that predated human civilization by 4,000 years. I reached into my pocket. I unfolded the page. It took 11 days, I said again, because some numbers deserve to be said twice. And then my predecessor filed the Evelyn incident assessment, 31 pages. Extinction notation was on page 30. The cause of incident field on page 29 was 1 word. I placed the page on his desk. He did not look at it. Humans are a mid-tier species, dues. Gareth said. His voice had not changed. Still the voice of the room. That is always in control, emotionally unstable, biologically limited. Their political systems fracture under. Their political systems fracture under everything except this, I said. He looked at me then, really looked the way he had not when I walked in. I had his attention. I wished I did not. Sir, I said, and my voice did. Something I had not planned. It cracked. Not broke, cracked the way old structures crack before they settle into a new shape. I have spent 212 cycles filing reports. I am very good at filing reports. I am perhaps the best on this vessel at filing reports. I have never, in 212 cycles, requested an emergency audience with a fleet commander. You requested it, here you are. Here I am, I said, because 4 children are dead because my predecessor filed a 31-page report on the Evelyn, and I have read it because Gareth 7 filed a routine deterrence report and called it minimal collateral impact, and because on my secondary screen right now there is an entertainment and news aggregate feed from the human colony networks, and for the last 6 hours that feed has been running completely normally. Doskareth frowned. That is a positive indicator. No, sir. The absence of alarm is. The absence of alarm in a human response is not a positive indicator. I leaned forward. I was not supposed to lean forward. It is the last positive indicator we will receive. Humans alarm before a response, the way that ocean storm before a wave. The storm is visible. You can prepare for the storm. When the storm stops, sir, when the water goes flat and quiet and everything looks calm. I stopped. He was looking at me with the expression of a man who has decided that the weather is simply louder than usual. That was when I did the thing I had not done in 200 cycles of service. I stood up, and I said the questions, not from the page, not in the careful diplomatic language of the first draft or the measured tones of the second, in my voice, my actual voice, the one that had been sitting at the bottom of my chest all night next to the Evelyn file and the music device and the number 4. Did we harm human children? The room went quiet. Do you know what danger approaches? Doskareth looked at me for a long moment. I will say this about him. He was not a cruel man. He was not the kind of commander who enjoyed the harm of others. He was a thorough man, strategic man, a man who had built his career on knowing exactly how much weight a situation carried and applying exactly the correct response. He had never read the Evelyn file. Vareth 9, he said, and his voice was still the voice of the room. But there was something behind it now, a hairline crack barely visible. You are a records officer. Yes, sir. You process incident reports. Yes, sir. You are not a military strategist. You are not a threat assessment specialist. You are not qualified to determine. I am the only person on this vessel who has read page 29, I said. He was quiet. I would like it on record, I said, that I came to you. I would like it on record that I used the words urgent and immediate risk. I would like it on record that I referenced the Evelyn file, that I cited the cause of incident assessment, that I stood in this office and asked you both questions clearly and without ambiguity. I picked up my page from his desk. He had not touched it. I would like all of that on record, I said, because I am a records officer. And in my experience, sir, the record is the only thing that survives. I walked out, down the corridor of the threefold patients, past the administrative wing, past 3 junior staff who nodded at me with no idea, past the viewport that showed the star field outside, clean and wide and full of distance. I walked back at my desk. I sat down. I opened a new document. At the top I typed Personal Log, Cycle 212, Day 44, Incident Assessment. Non-standard. I sat looking at the blank page below. That line. Then I began writing the second report. Not the official one, the real one, the one with the music device and the number 4 in page 29 of a file that everyone in the compact had decided to treat as very old news. I wrote it for the same reason I had written down the 2 questions before walking into Dues Kurth's office. Because some things need to be real before you can carry them. I was still writing when 14 hours later, the human signals went dark. Silence. Not the silence of empty space. Space is never quiet in the way people imagine. There is always something. Radio drift. Background radiation. The constant low conversational noise of a civilization going about its business. Across 100 frequencies, the human signal aggregate ran on 43 frequencies. At 300 ship time, all 43 went dark. I noticed it at 3:12 because I had not slept and I was still at my desk, and one of those 43 channels was the one I had been watching, the public news feed, the one where humans argued about politics and shared footage of their animals doing things that apparently required documentation and occasionally broke into genuine news that told you more about human civilization than any official diplomatic briefing ever would. That channel had been running when I sat down. At 3:12 it was not running. I refreshed it. Nothing. I checked the communications log. The commercial frequencies that ran between human colony installations and their trade partners were dark. The civilian navigation broadcasts that guided their agricultural convoys through the sector were dark. The open diplomatic channels that the Kurth communications team monitored as a matter of routine were dark. 43 frequencies. No error message, no static, no interference pattern that would suggest a technical fault. Just nothing. I opened the Evelyn file. I did not need to read it again. I had read it 4 times, but I opened it and I found the timeline section, and I looked at one specific line. 72 hours prior to first contact, all human outbound signals ceased. I checked the timestamp on the last human transmission we had received. I sat with that number for a moment. Then I opened my personal log and I wrote, "The silence has started." I want to be precise about what happened next because I think precision matters here, and I think the difference between what I did and what I should have done is a distance of about one decision. What I should have done was file an immediate amended threat assessment, escalate to Dues Kurth's office with the Evelyn timeline comparison, and formally request a full communications analysis from the signals team. What I did was open the human public news aggregate on my secondary screen. Still running. The human domestic networks were still alive, the feeds that ran inside their systems between their colonies and their stations and their private devices were carrying signal the same. As always, a news report about agricultural yields, a public debate about shipping routes, a man named Owen, identified as a community council representative on one of the outer colony installations, speaking at length about water reclamation priorities. Humans were still there. They had simply stopped talking to us. That distinction, that precise and specific distinction, The difference between a civilization that has gone dark and a civilization that has chosen deliberately and selectively to direct its silence at you and you alone. That distinction was the Evelyn file in 6 words. They did not go silent because they had nothing to say. They went silent because what was coming did not require announcement. I started packing. Not in an obvious way. I am a records officer. I am very good at doing things that look like something else. I began the process of backing up my personal files to the emergency archive drive I kept in my lower desk drawer. I cataloged my physical materials. I reorganized my clearance documentation. I also sent a message to a colleague, a woman named Grace who ran logistics on the compact civilian transit hub 3 sectors away, and I told her in the language we used for cargo routing, which means something different than cargo routing, that she might want to look at her own transfer options in the near future. She replied in 4 minutes. She asked if I was being serious or if I was being Verath 9. I told her there was no longer a meaningful difference. She began her own quiet packing at 400. At 6:30, the Keth Signals team filed a preliminary report, technical malfunction in the human communications array, possible solar interference. They expected restoration within 6 to 12 hours. I read the report. I did not respond to the report. I noted in my personal log that the Signals team had not read the Evelyn file. Most people had not read the Evelyn file. This is the thing about sealed documents. The sealing does not make them dangerous, the forgetting does. At 900, I made a decision that I have thought about many times since. I pulled every piece of academic literature the compact had collected on human physiology, not military capability assessments, not weapons analysis, science, the biology, the papers that researchers had written about how human bodies operated under stress conditions. I want to tell you what I found because I think it is important, and because I think it explains something that no military assessment in the compact's history had ever correctly explained. Humans are by most physical measurements unremarkable. Their bodies are soft in the way that biological tissue is soft. They have no natural armor. Their sensory range is limited compared to most species in the compact. They get cold, they get tired, they require water in quantities that their commanders historically treated as a logistical liability. The papers I read were not about those things. They were about what happens to a human body when it is placed under severe threat. A human body under threat releases chemical compound that the researchers described with the Keth equivalent of the word energizing. I found that translation insufficient. After reading 3 more papers, the compound does not simply energize. It restructures priorities, pain signals are rerouted, reaction time improves. Decision-making, already fast by galactic comparative standards, becomes faster, not impaired, not frantic, faster and cleaner. The way a blade is not faster when it is longer, but when it is sharper. And here is the part I sat with for a long time. This response is not limited to trained military personnel. Every human does this. The agricultural worker, the council representative, the parent. Every human body carries this capability. The way you carry a tool in a pocket. You do not think about it until you need When you need it, your hand goes to the pocket without instruction, without hesitation, without the long deliberation of strategy. It simply happens. Humans call the compound adrenaline. They know about it, they teach it to their children in biology classes. They have written poems about it. There is an entire category of human entertainment built around artificially triggering it so that people can experience it for pleasure, a species that recreates the sensation of crisis for enjoyment. I closed the research files. I opened my desk drawer and I looked at the emergency archive drive I had. Loaded it with everything I considered essential. The Evelyn file, my personal log, the 48th incident report with the manifest and the music device and the number 4. I added one more file. The human biology research. I added it because I thought whoever read my records after this should understand what was coming. Not in the way that military assessments described it as a force to be measured and countered, but in the way that the biology described it. A species that loves its children the way humans love their children, combined with a body that turns grief into a sharpened instrument. I want to be clear, I am not a poet, I am a records officer. But even I could see that the silence was not nothing. The silence was 43 frequencies of a species that had decided words were no longer the appropriate tool. At 1400 ship time, I sent a second message to Dew's Karath office. The reply came back in under a minute. This time, the commander was reviewing the communications analysis. He would address the situation through appropriate channels. He thanked me for my continued diligence. I filed the reply in my records. At 1600, the silence entered its second day. I sat at my desk and I watched the human domestic feeds, and I watched a man named Leo, a farmer on the colony installation nearest to the incident site, standing in front of a camera and speaking very quietly. He was speaking about his daughter. Her name was Ellie. She was 6 years old. She had been on the convoy. He spoke her name once. Then he looked at the camera with the expression of a man who has already decided something and is simply waiting for the world to catch up to the decision. I turned off the screen. I braced myself, and I waited. On the morning of day 3, the threefold Patience's long-range sensors picked up movement. Not a fleet formation, not anything the tactical overlay could categorize. Immediately, the sensor officer, a young man named Cole, who had been assigned to the vessel 8 months ago and still had the look of someone who expected his career to be interesting in manageable ways, filed a preliminary contact report at 7:40 and described the readings as anomalous. Anomalous. I read his report and I wanted to sit him down and tell him gently that the word he was looking for was not anomalous. The word was inevitable. But I did not tell him that. I was a records officer. I sat at my desk and I watched the secondary sensor feed on my personal screen, and I did not tell anyone what I was thinking. Here is what the sensors were showing. Human vessels were moving through the sector, not in a single direction, from multiple points. Colony installations that had been stationary for years were generating drive signatures. Trade haulers that had been running regular commercial routes were changing course. Survey craft that operated alone in the outer margins of disputed space were converging. Converging, not toward the nearest Keth installation, not toward the nearest diplomatic contact point, toward us. I opened a new page in my personal log, and I typed, "They are not sending a fleet." I stared at that line for a moment because it was not quite accurate. I deleted it. I typed, "They are sending everyone." Cole's sensor reports kept arriving. Every 30 minutes, new readings. The number of vessels on approach kept growing. By 9:30, he had counted 47 distinct drive signatures. By 1100, it was 93. By the time Duz Kureth called a command briefing at 1300, Cole had stopped counting individual vessels and was reporting mass totals. I attended the briefing. The command room of the threefold patience was not designed for fear. It was designed for certainty. Clean lines, high ceilings, a display table in the center showing tactical data in precise, organized layers. Duz Kureth stood at the head of it with his even voice and his ordered room and looked at the mass of contacts on the display. He looked at it for a long time. "Military composition?" he asked. Cole pulled up a breakdown. "Warships comprise approximately 30% of total contacts, sir. The remaining 70% are civilian class, colony transports, agricultural vessels, survey and research craft. One contact reads as a mobile medical installation." Silence in the room. "A hospital ship," said one of the tactical officers, a woman named Nora, who had a reputation for saying what the room was thinking before the room was ready to think it. "They sent a hospital ship, among other things," Cole said. Duz Garrett looked at the display. "The civilian vessels are support, infrastructure, logistics, supply chain for a prolonged engagement." I opened my mouth. I closed it. I opened it again. "Sir," I said, and everyone looked at me, because records officers do not speak at command briefings. This is not a written rule, it is simply understood. The civilian vessels are not support infrastructure. Duz Garrett's gaze moved to me with the patience of a man who is running out of it. "They are leading," I said. Cole checked his display. He was quiet. For a moment. "Sir, the records officer is correct. The civilian contacts are in the forward position. The warship signatures are behind them." The room was quiet. "The parents are leading the fleet," I said, and I heard my own voice say it. And I sat with what that meant in a way that I do not think anyone else in that room had the context to sit with. A man named Leo standing in front of a camera speaking his daughter's name once, then looking at the lens with a face that had already decided. He was out there somewhere in a colony hauler in the forward position ahead of the warships. Duz Garrett ordered a full tactical response. He ordered it with the voice of a man whose room is still in order, who still believes that control is a thing that lives in clean surfaces and organized displays. I left the briefing. I returned to my desk. I did something that I have never fully explained to anyone who has asked me about this period, because it is not a heroic action and it is not a strategic one. It is simply the thing I did. I opened a communications channel, a single channel on the human diplomatic frequency that had been dark for 3 days. I sent a contact request. I identified myself as Verith 9, diplomatic attaché. Keth Compact threefold patience, I said. that I was not a military officer. I said that I had filed a formal objection to the incident that precipitated this situation. I said that I wanted to speak to anyone who was willing to speak to me. I expected silence. I received silence for 11 minutes. Then the channel opened. Her voice was clear, no distortion. She had good equipment which told me she was on a well-maintained vessel. She spoke in the standard diplomatic language of the compact which humans learn the way. They learn most things completely and without apparent effort. Her name was Diana. She did not give her rank, she did not give her vessel designation. She spoke the way someone speaks when those categories have temporarily stopped mattering to them. Are there children on your ship? She asked. I had not expected that question. I had prepared for demands, ultimatums, the structured language of negotiation, or the structured language of warning. I had not prepared for that question. No, I said, the threefold patience is an adjudication, an administrative, vessel, civilian staff, and command personnel. No children. She was quiet for a moment. Do you know why we are here? She asked. Yes, I said. Do you know what happened on that convoy? I filed the incident report, I said. I read the manifest. I know about the music device. Another pause, longer. Then you know, she said, that we have nothing to discuss with your commander. I know, I said. Then why are you calling me? I thought about it. It was a fair question. Because I am a records officer, I said, and I wanted it on record that someone on this vessel tried. She was quiet for a moment more. Then she said, I am going to tell you something, not because it changes anything, because you said tried and I think you mean it. I do, I said. Ellie had just turned 6, Diana said. She used to make up songs, not real songs, just things she made up while she was doing other things, her father said. She sang while she packed for the convoy. She sang while she loaded her bag. The music device was so she could listen to her favorite recordings during the journey. I did not speak. She made up a song about leaving. Diana said her father remembered it. She sang it twice before they boarded. I sat at my desk in the administrative wing of the threefold patience, and I held the channel, and I did not say anything because there are moments when saying anything is the wrong action, and a records officer should know that better than most. I have nothing to say to your commander, Diana said again. I know, I said. The channel closed. I sat at my desk for a very long time. Then I picked up the emergency archive drive and I added one more file. Brief note, her name 6 years old, the music device, a song about leaving sung twice before boarding. I added it to the record. Then the threefold patience shook. Not a collision, the ship structure, carrying sound in a way that meant something large and irreversible had happened at a significant distance. Cole's sensor reports stopped being 30 minutes apart. They became continuous. The tactical channel lit with dues. Kareth's voice, even and measured, directing responses I already knew were insufficient. I sat at my desk. I did not run. I sat and I wrote in my personal log. The record exists. The record is complete. The record says we tried and we did not try enough, and the distance between those two things is 4 and a music device and a song sung twice. The ship shook again. I held the archive drive in both hands. and I waited to see what the record would have to hold next. I am writing this from the transit hub at Sector 9, where I have been for 42 days in a small office that belongs to Grace, who let me use it because she has known me long enough to understand that I process things by writing them down. She also let me use it because she began her own quiet packing at 400 on the night the signals went dark, and she considers this a debt I do not actually owe her, but she is the kind of person who keeps accounts anyway. The threefold patient survived. I want to be precise about what that means. The vessel is intact. Most of the personnel are accounted for. Dewes Gareth is alive, which I was not certain of at several points during the 7 hours following my conversation with Diana, and which I consider neither a relief nor a tragedy, but simply a fact that belongs in the record. The Cath Admiralty, as an operational structure, is a more complicated question. I will come back to that. The first thing I want to record, because I think it is the most important thing, is what the engagement looked like from my desk. I did not go to the observation deck. I did not attempt to watch from any viewport. I sat at my desk in the administrative wing with the sensor feeds and the communications logs on my screens, and I watched the engagement through numbers and signals the way I have watched everything in my career. What I saw was this. In the first 40 minutes, the Cath fleet responded in the standard tactical formation. Every procedure that 200 years of military tradition had refined was executed correctly. Dewes Gareth issued commands with the calm of a man whose room has always been in order. The tactical officers performed their roles. Everything was correct. The humans did not engage in the way the standard tactical formation was designed to counter. The warships, the 30% that Cole had identified, did not advance in a line. They fragmented, distributed. They moved in directions that our tactical overlay kept trying to classify and kept failing to classify, because the overlay was designed to predict responses based on known military doctrine, and what the human warships were doing was not following any doctrine the overlay recognized. Cole told me later, weeks after, that he had watched the tactical display for those 40 minutes and felt that he was trying to read a language he had never been taught. Meanwhile, the civilian vessels, the 70% that were in the forward position, did something that no one in the command room had an explanation for in real time. They stopped. They held position between the two fleets, and they did not fire, and they did not retreat, and they did not advance. They simply remained. Cole said it was the civilian vessels that broke the tactical officers first. Not the warships, not the weapons fire. The colony haulers and the agricultural transports and the medical installation, holding position, silent on all channels, unmoving. The tactical overlay kept trying to calculate their purpose. It generated 17 different threat classifications. None of them felt correct, Cole said, because none of them accounted for why a colony hauler full of non-military civilians would hold position in a combat zone. I knew why. They were not there as weapons. They were there as witnesses. A civilization does not send its civilians into a combat zone to assist with targeting solutions. It sends them because there is a thing that needs to be seen by the people it happened to. A reckoning is not only a military Event, a reckoning is attended. The parents were there to attend. The engagement lasted 7 hours. I will not go through it hour by hour, because I do not think the tactical details are what this record needs. The tactical details exist in Cole's sensor logs and in the official compact incident assessment and in 3 separate military analysis documents that I have been asked to review and contribute to and have declined because the tactical details are not what I know about this event. What I know is the number 4. What I know is the music device. What I know is Diana's voice on a clear channel telling me about a girl named Ellie who made up songs while she packed at 1400 on the day of the engagement. The Cath Fleet's operational capacity dropped below the threshold that dues Kareth had established as the point of mandatory withdrawal. He gave the order. The threefold patience, being a non-combat administrative vessel, had already been directed away from the engagement zone by then, which is why I'm writing this from Grace's office at Sector 9 instead of writing nothing from nowhere. The withdrawal was accepted. The humans let the threefold patience go. I want to be careful about what I say next because I have thought about it for 42 days and I still do not think I have the correct words, but I will try, because that is what the record requires. In the 42 days since the engagement, I have spoken to 14 people who were also present on the threefold patience. Officers, administrative staff, Cole. Once over a very long meal at a transit hub canteen where neither of us ate very much. Every one of them, when I asked what they remembered most clearly, gave a different answer. Some remembered the weapons fire, some remembered dues Kareth's voice on the command channel. Some remembered the moment the tactical overlay stopped producing reliable classifications and began displaying simply unknown in the threat type field. Cole remembered the civilian vessels holding position. I remembered the channel I opened and the voice that answered and a song sung twice before boarding. What none of us remembered, what none of us had an account of, was the moment it became clear that the engagement was already over before it started. There was no single moment. It was a quality that built across hours, the feeling of watching something happen that could not be made to not happen, the way that weather cannot be made to turn back by requesting it. You prepare, you respond, you follow the correct procedures. The weather does not consult your procedures. On day 15, I was asked by the Compact's Diplomatic Reconstruction Office to provide a formal assessment of the events and their causes for the historical archive. This is the work I would normally do. Without hesitation, I have filed reports on 14 territorial engagements. I have cataloged species, contact events. I once wrote a 40-page analysis of a boundary dispute that required me to reconstruct 6 years of commercial shipping records from fragmentary data. I sat in front of the blank document for 4 hours. Then I started writing. Not the formal assessment, I filed that too eventually. But first I wrote this, the personal log that you are reading now, if anyone is reading it, which I believe someone will be eventually, because records persist in ways that living things do not, and I believe the Compact's archive will exist long after most of its current members have reorganized themselves around this event. I want to tell you what I think happened, not what the tactical Assessments will say, not what the Diplomatic Reconstruction Office will classify it as. What I think Verth 9, diplomatic. Attaché, third rank records officer. The person who read the Evelyn file and sat with the number 4 and opened a channel to a woman named Diana. What I think happened is that the Cathar Compact encountered a species and made an assessment based on observable metrics, physical capacity, weapon systems, fleet tonnage, political coherence, every number we measured, placed humans in the mid-tier category. Not a threat to ignore, but not a threat. That required fundamental strategic reconsideration. The assessment was not wrong. It was incomplete. The metrics we used were the correct metrics for measuring a species as a military opponent. They were not the correct metrics for measuring what happens to a species when its children are harmed. Those are different measurements. And here is the thing I keep coming back to. The thing that has kept me at Grace's desk for 42 days, writing and rewriting the same core observation. We have records of every species the Compact has ever engaged. We have records of their weapons, their tactics, their fleet compositions, their response, doctrines under stress. We do not have a single comprehensive study on what any of them will do when their children are placed in danger. We never thought to measure it. We never thought it was a relevant variable. I think about Gorth 7's report, routine, deterrence, successful suppression, minimal collateral impact. He was not lying, he was reporting what he saw through the lens of the metrics he had been given. 11 passengers, of which 4 were lost, is by certain measures a low casualty engagement. He had no metric for what 4 means to the people to whom 4 belongs. He had no framework for understanding that a civilization which experiences love in the way that humans experience love does not process for the way report processes for. For humans, 4 is not a casualty count. 4 is a name and a song and a music device packed by a 6-year-old who expected to arrive somewhere. 4 is the reason a man named Leo stood in front of a camera and spoke his daughter's name once and then said nothing else because there was nothing else to say that the expression on his face was not already saying. 4 is the reason Diana's voice was clear and steady on a channel that had been dark for 3 days. 4 is the reason that Colony Hollers held position as witnesses in a combat zone. I have tried to put a number to the military power that humans brought to the engagement at Sector 7. Cole's figures place the fleet mass at approximately 4 times the combined tonnage of the Cath forces in the area. The tactical analysts at the Reconstruction Office will say the outcome was inevitable from a force projection standpoint. They are right. They are also missing the point in a way that I find quietly maddening. The engagement was not primarily demonstration of military power. It was a demonstration of something the Compact does not have a diplomatic category for, something that I have been trying to name for 42 days and keep failing to name in a way that the formal assessment would accept. I will try one more time. When a species is willing to send everyone, not just the soldiers, but the farmers and the parents and the medical staff and the people who study soil reclamation, when all of those people are willing to cross a sector and hold position in a combat zone because of 4, that is not a military capability. That is a limit. Not a limit as in a weakness, a limit as in a line that does not move, a thing. That simply is the way gravity is, the way the cold of deep space is. You do not negotiate with it, you do not find a tactical response to it. You either know it is there and act accordingly, or you discover it the way that the Evelyn discovered it, 11 days and 31 pages at a time. I have been asked whether humans are dangerous. I find the question incomplete. Dangerous to whom, doing what, under what conditions? A river is dangerous. Cold wind is dangerous. The answer is not in the thing itself, but in the distance you stand from it and the choices you make about that distance. What I know is this. Humans build portable music devices, small enough for a 6-year-old to carry. They teach their children to make up songs. They log a child's personal effects on a convoy manifest with the same careful attention they give to the soil, processors, and the seed stock. And they do this because they believe in whatever biological and cultural framework produces this belief that the small details of a small person's life are worth recording, worth carrying, worth the weight in a bag on a journey to somewhere new. I know this because I read the manifest. I know it the way I know the Evelyn file, the way I know page 29. I know it because the record exists and the record says owner designation 3 of 11, personal effects music device. Child-sized, unrecovered. Unrecovered. That word was in a column, a clinical column in a military manifest. The person who typed it probably did not pause over it. It was the correct classification, technically accurate. It was also the beginning of everything that followed. I am going to finish this log now, not because I have run out of things to say, but because I think the log has reached the place where it says what it needs to say, and adding more words after the right stopping point is a habit of people who are afraid of silence. I filed the official assessment yesterday. The Compact's diplomatic reconstruction office accepted it. It will go into the archive. It uses the correct language and the correct classifications, and it makes the correct recommendations about revised engagement protocols and diplomatic contact procedures and threat tier reassessment for the human species. It is a good report. It is not the real report. The real report is this one. The real report starts with a manifest and ends with a word in a footnote. And everything in between is the distance between two things that the Compact never understood were measuring different dimensions. The word I submitted for the footnote of the official assessment was irreversible. The archive declined to include it because it is not a standard classification. I included it in the footnotes of this personal log instead. Irreversible. Not as a threat, not as a condemnation. As a description. Some things once done cannot be undone. Some numbers once real cannot be made smaller. Some silences once started carry inside them everything that comes after. The Compact will reassess the protocols, will change the threat tier. Classifications will be revised. Dues. Gareth will write his own account, which different from mine in the ways that powerful people's accounts always differ from the accounts of records officers. All of that will happen. And somewhere in the record below all of it, there will be a manifest from a convoy in Sector 7, disputed. Territory C4, agricultural equipment. soil processors, seed stock, personal effects. And at the bottom of the personal effects column, owner designation 3 of 11. 1 music device. Child-sized. Unrecovered. Do not harm their children. This is the whole report. Everything else is just the number 4.